Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to see you all here for our April Renters Meeting. So today, me and Cassie will be sharing a little bit about repairs and housing conditions and how you can get your landlord to make some necessary repairs. So let me just share my screen. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right, great. So we're going to start off today with just a reminder that everyone here on this call has a right to a safe and healthy home. And this is regardless of your immigration status. This is regardless of how much you pay in rent. Your landlord may say, oh, well, I keep the rent low, so I don't have to keep your home in good condition. And this is not true. Even if your rent is lower than market, there are certain rules and regulations that your landlord must follow to keep your home safe. However, even if you have these rights, no one else is going to enforce them for you. You have to be the one to enforce your rights, to know your rights, and to stand up for yourself. And that's why all of us are here tonight, so we can learn together and support each other, and we can be a community so you aren't just alone sticking up for yourself against your landlord. So, just because you have a right doesn't mean that it will magically happen. We do have to enforce those on our own.
So you might be wondering, what are your landlord's obligations when it comes to maintaining your building? We're going to do a short game of true or false. So as Catherine moves through the slides, I'll read a statement and then I'll ask you to raise your hand if you think that statement is true. Okay, so true or false? Your landlord can enter your apartment at any time as long as they knock. So go ahead and just put your hand up if you think this statement is true. I don't see a single hand raised. Can't fool this crowd. Okay, so this statement is actually false. So a landlord must provide 24-hour notice before accessing a unit for routine repairs. And after the new sanitary code changes go into effect at the end of this month, your landlord will need to provide 48-hour notice before entering your unit. But this doesn't apply to emergency repairs, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so the next question, or statement rather, true or false? You must have a lease to have a right to repairs. So raise your hand if you think it's true that you have to have a lease in order to have the right to repairs in your apartment. Alternatively, you could say if you don't have a lease, you don't have a right to repairs. Anyone? Nope. Okay, cool. So this is also false. So all tenants are under the warranty of habitability, which is a law that says in exchange for rent, the landlord must keep the premises safe and healthy. So if you're paying for rent, you have those rights to repairs. And this applies no matter how much you pay for rent or whether or not you have a lease. Okay, the next one is true or false. The heat must work so that temperatures can be kept at 64 degrees Fahrenheit or 18 degrees Celsius during winter nights. So raise your hand if you think this statement is true. 1 and 2. Many hands, many hands. Okay, ding, 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 you are correct. So this rule applies from September 30th through May 15th, once the new sanitary code changes go into effect. Okay, true or false? It is the tenant's responsibility to exterminate mice. Raise your hand if you think it's your job to exterminate mice in your apartment. I'm not seeing any hands. That would be kind of gross. Okay, so this is false. If a building has 2 or more units, the landlord is responsible for dealing with pests. Okay. True or false? If you pay for gas and electricity, they must be separately metered, meaning separately metered from your neighbors. So raise your hand if you think that if you pay for gas and electricity, they have to be separately metered. Lots of hands. Okay. Really good job. You guys are on top of this. This is true. So if you get a gas bill or an electric bill, those utilities have to be metered separately from other units. This means that your bill shouldn't be split with other units, and your unit should not share a meter with other units. Quick little side story. My apartment shares a meter with other units, and so me and my neighbor haven't had to pay for gas and electric because my landlord can't figure out what to do about it. But if I didn't know that, I probably would have been paying for 2 apartments, gas and electric. Okay, we can go to the next one.
All right, that was pretty impressive. Everyone here knows their stuff. I'm glad to see it. So one reason that we wanted to talk about housing conditions and repairs tonight is because all tenants in Massachusetts will soon be getting some new rights for a safe and healthy apartment. So the state sanitary code, which is one of the laws and is arguably the most important law that regulates housing, is having some changes that will go into effect at the end of April, possibly the beginning of May, and many of those changes are largely favorable for tenants. So here at the bottom, there's a link where you can keep up to date with some of these changes once they go into effect. And then after the meeting today, we will send a more comprehensive list of those changes. It's a lot to go through right now, so we're just going to talk about some of the most important changes, but we will send out those resources so everyone can be informed about what they should be looking out for. Okay, so first of all, one of the major changes is that for major appliances like your fridge, your stove, or your oven, if there is not a written agreement saying that those are the tenant's responsibility, under the new changes, those will be the landlord's responsibility. So, for example, if you don't have a lease and your fridge breaks, it is your landlord's responsibility to replace or repair that fridge. However, a landlord can still put in a lease that, the stove and oven will be the tenant's responsibility. That is legal. But if your lease does not say anything about those appliances being your responsibility, that means that those will be the landlord's responsibility. So make sure that you are checking your lease to know, whose responsibility it will be once the new state sanitary code goes into effect. Okay, another major change is that the state sanitary code will now say that the building structure must be free of mold. So mold must be removed from your apartment, which shockingly was not included in the state sanitary code beforehand. This also means that water leaks in the apartment must be cleaned up within 48 hours, so things don't get damp and mold can't grow. Another major change is that the state sanitary code clarifies some regulations around pests. So pests, for example, rodents, insects. And so for apartments where there are 2 or more units, so if it is a single family home with just one family renting, that is excluded. But for 2 or more units, it is the landlord's responsibility to exterminate and mitigate those pests. Another change, bed bugs. So if the Board of Health finds bed bugs in your home, they must inspect the units adjacent to your apartment. So your neighbors, their apartments should be inspected to make sure that those bed bugs have not traveled to those units as well, which will be great to stop the spread of those bugs. And then lastly, another major change is that if your house is condemned, so if the state says that this house, humans cannot live here anymore because it is in such poor condition, if it is condemned under the state sanitary code, your landlord must provide, comparable housing for either the rest of your lease term or until you find suitable alternative housing. So this means that it will be the landlord's responsibility to make sure you're still housed if the state says that you can no longer live in your house because it is in such poor condition. However, this is only for the state sanitary code. So it's really important to know which regulation your house would be condemned under, because, for example, if there's a natural disaster such as a fire in your house and no one can live there anymore because of the damage, that would not apply because the house would be condemned under the building code. So it's really important to know under which code or which law, this condition would be under, so you know whether your landlord has to provide you housing or not. Okay, I know that's a lot of information. We're gonna send this all out after the meeting too. So thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so you know your rights, but as we all know, it can be really hard to get your landlord to actually make those repairs. So how can we make sure that the landlord is doing what they have to do? So first of all, if you're comfortable, you should start out by asking your landlord, but there are some tips about the best way to do this. So for one, make sure that you are taking photos of the conditions, and the photos should have a timestamp. So in this photo, in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that there's a time and date. Just so there's like a paper trail of, what conditions were in your apartment and when. So you can use an app that we're going to send out after the meeting that has a timestamp. You can also, if you have an iPhone, you can take a photo, and then when you click on the photo, it shows the time and date, and you can take a screenshot of that. And it's just really good to have that record. Our other advice is to make sure you're always communicating with your landlord over writing. So there's a paper trail because, say, for example, if you have to go to court, you don't want to be in a situation where it's a he said, she said situation where it's all was a conversation. You want to have proof of what happened and what your landlord said. So I wanted to share this great tool with you all, which I think is a great way to, document your conditions and make sure that those fixes are actually made. So this is a website called Up to Code. and it was developed by Greater Boston Legal Services to help tenants get necessary repairs. And so this is a very user-friendly website, and it's built to be as easy as possible for us to get fixes made. So the website is available in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole, and it allows you to go room by room. So you can see this is in Spanish, but you can see here that it lists each room, and then when you click on it, it gives a list of what your landlord has to do. You can click on what your landlord isn't doing and then upload a photo to document those conditions and kind of create like a journal. And then the website will help you send an email to your landlord, or perhaps file in court, or call the inspectional services department. So this is a great tool to help you, and I really suggest that everyone here uses it. Your neighbors can help you with this, your family can help you with this, organizers at CAS can help you with this. So I really suggest you check it out. As you know, there's a lot in the sanitary code that we cannot talk about tonight, but everything is included in this website. So if you want to dig into what your landlord has to do, this is a great, easily to understand way to do it. It's not like reading a law. It's made so it's easy for us to understand. Okay, so say that your landlord, you've asked for repairs and your landlord won't make repairs. One thing you can do is call the inspectional of the services department, which is a city department. However, we have to be prepared for these inspections because sometimes they don't go as well as we'd like them to. So for example, the inspector can find tenants as well under the code. So it's really important to clean your apartment and make sure there aren't things blocking the doorways if the inspector comes. You should also be making sure that you're showing the inspectors the problems, and that you're requesting a copy of the report after. There's also a risk that the inspector could condemn your apartment, and that may end up in a situation where your housing is in jeopardy. So that should be a risk you're aware of, especially if you're in a unit where there's too many people living. That's something that, they could definitely fine and could result in your housing being jeopardized.
Thanks, Catherine. So one of the most important things you can take away from this presentation is that we have more power together. If you notice a problem in your building, talk to your neighbors. They just may be experiencing the same issues as you. You can contact your landlord together as a tenants union and be united together for better living conditions. Oh, I'm supposed to actually, I think I missed something. I was gonna share about that. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so the picture that you see here is members of the Fairlawn Tenant Association in Mattapan who organized for better living conditions, and they also organized against rent hikes. So this is something that you can do with your building neighbors as a tenants union. Okay, and then, so what can you do if your landlord doesn't respond to maintenance requests? You can escalate the issue, but do so carefully. It may be helpful to contact the CAS organizer before taking these next steps. An option is that you can withhold your rent until your issue is resolved. You could also do something called repair and deduct, which means that you can take care of the repairs yourself, keep the receipts, and then deduct the amount from your rent balance. You could also break your lease if it comes to it, or go to court. Each of these options should be carefully considered, and we encourage you to talk to your neighbors and to cast staff for support. And finally, please remember that retaliation is illegal. This is really important. Your landlord cannot punish you for requesting repairs or for organizing with your neighbors. Retaliation might look like lease non-renewal or a no-fault eviction. If you experience anything like this, please reach out to someone from. So that is the end of the presentation, and now we'll move into a question and answer section. So if you have any questions about the presentation, you can come off mute or put your hand up and we'll answer them as best we can.
I have a question. So my landlord is very quick to repair things, but they only repair them enough that it's a short-term fix. So I know the problem will come back again, and that contributes to a bad living situation overall. I'm wondering if there are ways to, work with this issue where they're following the law technically, but not actually making our living situation better.
I'm not sure legally, but when I hear that, I wonder if that's a really good opportunity where like a tenants union could come in and kind of have that power to, force a request, demand that your landlord do a better job with repairs. And because there's more people, there's more power. I don't know if there's a legal avenue for that. But again, I'm not a lawyer. None of us here are experts. We're all learning together and on this journey of finding out our rights together. So if anyone else has any thoughts, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, there's in case somebody didn't see it, there's a comment in the chat, document every time the same thing breaks and what the fix was. I think that makes a lot of sense. How long it lasts, keep track of all that. Yeah, I definitely second what Catherine said. And yeah, I would say first step would be, if you feel comfortable, to follow up with your landlord on that concern. But yeah, you're definitely going to have more power if you're doing it with your neighbors.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make an addition to one of the true and falses, and it's that if your meter, not only if your meter is connected to another unit, if a meter is doing more than one unit, but also if your meter is also connected to common area electrically or for gas, for example, for dryer or for water heater or whatever, that's also the responsibility of the landlord to pay. So your meter should only be for what you use within your home.
How can we know about that if the meters are connected to something else or not? To be honest, it depends on what kind of utility it is. For gas, it's a little bit easier because usually you're going to see the meter and you're going to see that the pipes go out to different places. Sometimes it's easy to follow the pipes to see what they're connected to. If they're connected to something that's not part of your apartment, that's something that I'm going through right now. And I see that they're connected to a lot of things in the basement. With the electricity, it's a little bit more difficult. But I'm not 100% sure, but I think that you could talk with EverSource or whoever your service provider is to have them do an inspection to see what things are connected to what with regard to the electricity and which things are connected to which meter. Also take photos and document everything as we've been mentioning, and keep those reports so that you can share those with the landlord, so that they can start to pay for that. And also, if this is happening and you've been paying more than what's on your meter, then it's not just that the landlord has to start paying for the utilities, but they also, if you wanted to take them to court, they might have to pay 3 times, you know, what you've been paying for those things so far. So obviously that's difficult because we don't have access to lawyers, etc. But sometimes when we mention that to the landlord and they don't know what the laws are and so on, they're probably not going to want to go to court. So they might help you out a little bit more. They might come to an agreement with you and pay you back for a lot of the past utilities. And going forward, of course, they'd be responsible for paying the utilities. Thank you, Camila, for bringing up this topic. It's super important. Right now, you know, we don't know until what point we're paying things that we're consuming, because we don't know if we're connected to, you know, other common areas or other apartments in other parts of the building. So thank you, Camila, for making us aware of this issue. For example, in my personal situation, I'm paying almost twice, you know, what a single family would be paying, almost $300, more than $300 a month for electricity monthly. Yeah, you have to be careful. And in fact, the way that I found out that I was paying for the gas for common areas was by asking my neighbors how much they were paying so that I could compare and contrast to see, you know, in the same building, are we paying the same amounts? We've got the same building, same conditions. So I saw how much they were paying, and that's how I realized that something was wrong. And by the amount that you're mentioning, it sounds likely that you are probably paying electricity for other things, or at least, or unless you're not using a lot of electricity, but you should definitely stay up to date on these things, talk to your neighbors and compare with them and find out what they're paying and see if it's more. Thank you. This is so important. I really appreciate this. And I remember that, I think this happened about 10 years ago. Sorry, I'm going to share this experience that I had. I lived in a 2nd floor apartment, and on the 3rd floor, there were other people living there. And I said, why am my electrical bill so high? And then when I started to investigate, I found out that I was paying for the attic as well. And so I called EverSource and I asked them, how many units were there in this building? And they said, there's only 2 units, but here we have 3 families living here. No, they said there's only 2 units. There's only 2 meters. So I came and I let the landlord know about this. And what they did was they didn't rent that out anymore. But there was a lot of time. It took a long time before I realized this. And so, you know, I couldn't do anything more to get that money back. If I, you know, if I hadn't asked, I would have kept paying it. Well, now that you know, I hope that never happens to you again. But if it happens, talk to the landlord and tell them that they have to pay at least what you've already paid before. And also, you know, what the landlords can do is can add a meter if they want. But I'm really sorry that you had to go through this. And if it happens again, then you can fight for them to return the money back that they owe you. Thank you for sharing, Dulce.
Yeah, Dulce, thank you so much for sharing that story. And that's actually an excellent transition to our next section today,